you're in luck, because we have the inimitable Michael Johns, a co-founder of the Tea Party movement and a former assistant to President Bush, and he has some interesting things to say on the subject of the Democratic National Convention. Michael, from your perspective, what was missing in the Democratic Convention that we saw the last few days?
I thought two things were glaringly absent. Number one was specificity as it relates to the policy agenda that Biden and Harris are offering. You did not hear a lot of specifics as it relates to many of these policies that are going to have immense, and in my judgment, largely negative consequences on this country. The other word or phrase that you didn't hear much of was Joe Biden, meaning if you look particularly at the first few days,
President Obama, you'd have no idea that this was we get
meaning
the president, but you'd have no idea Joe Biden was running against them.
Meaning, in an abstract way, if we were all sitting around planning a convention to nominate, a major party's nominee for president, you would highlight this man's or woman's accomplishments, attributes, background, and yet throughout this convention, it looked like everything possible to keep the actual man's name and his 47-year public record at the highest levels of government essentially unknown or hidden from the American people. And I think one of the predominant reasons that you do that is that 47-year career, nearly half a century, is utterly unremarkable in the sense that forget partisan attacks, forget how conservatives view it, meaning you literally ask a Biden supporter, what is this man's singular accomplishment in nearly half a century? They struggle to articulate an answer to that question.
And which he's now anxiously running away from.
What's that? Obamacare?
Biden crime bill, which he's now eagerly running away from.
It was probably the most consequential one, and yet I can't think of anything more unpopular. I mean, is he going to run basically as, an opponent to a president who enacted the First Step Act, the first major piece of criminal justice reform in modern times? President Trump has not received enough credit for recognizing that we have a lot of people in jail who don't belong there, that the treatment of people incarcerated is often inhumane and unbecoming of a Western democracy, and that processes and procedures have been flawed. So while we have all these riots in the street that ostensibly are designed to undermine support for President Trump, it's Trump, not Biden, who's been the leader on criminal justice reform, as much as there's still a lot more left to do. I think legislatively that's indisputable. And, and then you go through the let's just take the core tenets of this platform. They're going to raise $4 trillion in taxes on basically 80% of the country. No mention of that, really, no explanation of how that would add to jobs or add to wages, particularly in an economy that's been so decimated with the pandemic. No border policy. I sort of understand that they will not fund the wall, oppose the wall. We have 11 to 30 million illegals in this country. Literally seemingly no limit, I guess, on how high that number will go. At 40 million, 50 million, 60 million, at what point does it become a problem to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
Yes, Michael and Zen, you'd have no idea that there was still a war in Afghanistan going on. I'd love to know what the plan is for Afghanistan. That was something that was woefully inadequate. And I guess the rising violence in 30 of our largest cities, that's something that I suppose we didn't have time for.
Yeah, the entire thing feels like a big smokescreen because they're selling, Kamala Harris, they're selling this pipe dream. And I just feel like if Joe Biden truly wants to connect with his audience, and it is an audience because that's what he's doing. He's on a platform, connect with the people, connect with whoever will carry him through to this dream that he's selling America. The problem is that he has positioned everybody around him and has retreated in the middle. And he has a lot of flash. He has the Kamala Harris. He has the celebrities coming out. A lot of these celebrities, when they come out and they speak on the platform about change, and what they're failing to realize is, and as a millennial mom, you don't really get to take away the kind of power that you're asking the government to take away, and then just expect that everything will fall into place and that we will all help each other as citizens. Because when you have when you have the rioters and the protesters on the Upper East Side marching, saying, "Who will keep us safe? We will keep us safe." And I, as a mom, am looking from the sidelines, and I'm holding my 4.5-year-old little girl with my bag.
Is there a question in there?
Yeah, if somebody comes and rips my bag out of my hands, who's
You
keeping?
want, look, law enforcement, there's very passionate views about it, but at the end of the day, the American people expect that the rule of law is going to be upheld. We now have throughout this country, for a couple months now, over a few months now, a complete lawlessness whose the core of the problem lies in Democrat Party and Democrat mayors that have unbelievably come to the conclusion that certain criminal offenses, if they're committed in the name of a certain ideology in a certain part of the city, are utterly permissible, even sometimes encouraged. And those same crimes done in another part of the city without the ideological association are indisputable felonies that are warranting of arrest and heavily prosecution and incarceration. That is essentially the erosion of the rule of law. And I think it's one of the referendum, basically, that confronts the American people this November 3 is, do you want to see our justice system on a federal, state, and local level broken down into that level of politicization? Because, as Frank correctly said, they had an opportunity this week, which I was interested to see where they would come down on this, to either support the street riots and say, look, this Marxist revolution, basically, that is underway in our streets is something we support and encourage. Conversely, they could have come out and said, look, that we oppose it. And they did neither. They tried to act like it wasn't happening.
Speaking of lawlessness, I want to get your reaction to the arrest of Steve Bannon yesterday. What, if anything, does this do politically to President Trump? And what do you see happening for Mr. Bannon?
Well, okay, so a few things. Firstly, he is innocent until proven guilty. That's not a cliche. That's the rule of law in this country. Number two, I believe he has been an enormously, actually a more constructive force politically since he left the White House than while he was there. I think his voice on the problems and challenges we confront in communist China is just unbelievably valuable. I personally find very few commentators or analysts that I actually learn from, and yet, I've tuned into his podcasts a few times, and I'm finding unbelievably instructive. I mean, this guy is, I guess, a lot smarter than I originally had even realized. So I have admiration for him on that front. Now, the project itself, I do have some first-person observation with. I was approached early on in large part because I think conservatives in this country trust my judgment. When I say this is a project we're supporting, they often support it. When I say it's not, they often don't. They look for guidance from me. I did not see merit in this project from the very beginning. I refused to endorse it publicly. I encouraged people who asked me about it not to donate to it, because the idea of building a wall through a nonprofit organization just seemed to me to be completely inconceivable. They couldn't raise the amount of funds that were necessary. There were issues as it related to zoning laws and permits that are required that's very unlikely a nonprofit organization could successfully navigate. And maybe most importantly, I thought it actually took some of the pressure off of Congress to address this issue at the precise moment when the president was saying it was an important national security and economic and public health priority to the country.
Well, Michael, it is always a treat talking with you. I guess we'll see you this time next Friday.
You bet. You guys have a good week. Thank you. Good weekend.